All right, I think we're going to get started on our next session. Good morning. My name is Josh Li, and I'm the chair of the Asian American Google Network. And so on behalf of AAGN and the Authors at Google series and the Google U2U Guide Summit, it's my distinct pleasure to welcome all of you, as well as our speaker, Charlene Li, to a talk focused on her book. So this is the second time I've had the chance to introduce Charlene at Google. AAGN had invited her to come out a few months ago to kind of give us career advice, and it was a really well-received session. She kind of boiled down a lot of years of experience into some top 10 lessons for career advice. But today, her focus is talking about her book, Groundswell. So in terms of Charlene's background, she definitely is an independent thought leader on emerging technologies with a strong focus on social technologies, interactive media, and marketing. She now is the founder and owner of a business, the Altimeter Group, and she focuses on providing consulting advice to companies looking to reach these emerging areas. And she keeps a blog herself at blog.altimetergroup.com. So prior to that, she was a vice president and principal analyst at Forrester Research. And while during her time there, she co-authored the business bestseller Groundswell, Winning in a World Transformed by Social Technologies. And that's the reason why she's here, because she's so relevant to the overall theme of the summit. And some of the lessons are definitely applied, very applicable to what we do here at Google in supporting our users. Before that, she has had experience working in media at San Jose Mercury News, as well as did some consulting at Monitor Group. Charlene is a graduate of Harvard Business School as well as Harvard College. And just kind of a story about how we actually connected. I was on Facebook. One of my friends had, connected to Charlene, and whenever I see that, I kind of scroll through who's connected to among my friends, and I noticed that this person was connected to Charlene. Now, I had always, seen some of Charlene's writings, and like, wow, it would be great someday to maybe get her to come to speak at AAGN. But I always thought that, Forrester was based in Cambridge, so I thought she was based there. But when I clicked onto her profile, I noticed, she was based in the Bay Area. So I just sent her a note through Facebook saying, hey, Charlene, we have this new group called the Asian American Google Network. Would you like to come and speak? And then so quickly, we kind of did that exchange all through the Facebook messaging. So it kind of just, again, speaks to the power that she's talking about using, the emerging social networking sites to do all kinds of interesting things. And so in addition to all her accomplishments, she's also won some pretty prestigious awards, such as one of the top women to watch in 2008 by Ad Age, and as well as the 50 most influential people in Silicon Valley by Now Public. So at this point, I would like to invite Charlene to come up and share with us a lot of her insights from the book Groundswell. Thanks.
Okay. So thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for the kind introduction, Josh. What I'm going to be talking today is about the book, but also about some of the current research that I have. The vagaries of book publishing is that you have to finish a book way ahead of time when it was actually published. So we finished the book in November a year ago. And so I'm going to go through some of the ideas and concepts in the book, but also give you an idea of what I'm also seeing for the future. So first of all, when we talk about social media, we often think about things like this: a jumble of words, terms, ideas, technologies, Twitter, things like OAuth, standards that are being written. But I actually would posit that this is not what social media is all about. As you heard from Scott Cook, some of you are here for the previous one, it's really about what kind of relationship you can develop with the people you're trying to reach, whether that's your customers, your partners, your fellow employees and colleagues. And what I thought I'd do to just give you an idea is that it's really about this. It's a short video that I have, and I think it really does capture what it's about.
Hey there. Long time no see. Looking good.
Yeah. Let's just keep this simple. I want a divorce.
What now?
I think you heard me just fine.
Come on. This is me. What's wrong?
We don't talk anymore.
I just put down a mill on a TV commercial just to talk to you.
Exactly. You do all the talking. I never get a chance.
Talk on our website, can't you?
Sure. If I want to say, order this product.
See?
It's not exactly a dialogue.
What about the print campaign, You can't tell me you missed the billboard in Times Square. That was like a 200-foot tall declaration of love.
You're saying you love me, but you're not behaving like you love me. It's not genuine.
I don't know. The agency said I was genuinely being funny, genuinely being charming. They said you would love everything I did.
Could you keep your voice down? You're not doing a radio commercial. Look, whether you're funny or not, it's just, I've changed, and you haven't. I mean, we don't even hang out in the same places anymore. You're not even listening, are you?
Coupons. You want coupons, don't you? Look, come by the store. I got 2 words for you. Loyalty, reduction. Am I right? That was it, wasn't it? Let's just hug.
If you knew me, you'd know I don't care about that.
Know you? Sweetheart, I know everything about you. You're 28 to 34. Your online interests include music, movies, and laser hair removal. You have a modest but dependable disposable income. Am I the only one not getting the problem here?
I'm out of here.
Oh, come on. Don't be like that. Look, I'll tell you what. Come back here tomorrow. I'll give you the chance to win a Bahamas vacation. There's a small chance, minuscule, but technically still a chance. Why don't you be like the old days?
This was an ad that was put together by a competitor. But one of the things I wanted to just focus on was really, again, is to focus on the relationships. And so oftentimes, and again, what Google and so many other companies are focused on is not the relationship. And oftentimes what it looks like is this. What kind of relationship do you want? It's something that's very transactional oriented. You know, win the account, win the buy, and then off you go. One and done kind of strategy. Is it occasional? Is it impersonal, very short term? Or is this the kind of relationship that you really want? You want something that's long term, that's very passionate, it's intimate, it's very personal, and it's all, most importantly, that person is really loyal to you. And I think that my position here is that social technologies can really bring you much closer to develop those relationships that are so difficult today to form. People can go out there, you saw all the messaging that was in that video. And oftentimes that's what marketers are trained to do, to have a message. They do not understand how to have a conversation. It's not necessarily in the DNA of most marketers. So what I'm going to talk about are a couple things. First of all, how do you create a social strategy? And that's the foundation in the Groundswell book that Josh Bernoff and I wrote together. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the best practices, what are some of the pitfalls to avoid, and then I'm going to spend some time talking about what the future is going to look like. And that is a little bit in the book, but again, a core part of my research going forward. So first of all, how do you create a social strategy? I believe that there are a couple key things to do. And I broke it down into 5 goals in the book, and I even just want to distill it down even further into just 4 goals. The most important thing you can do is to go out there and listen and learn from your customers. As Scott was saying, it's so important to hear what they're saying. Before you can engage in a dialogue, before you can talk to your customers and your partners and again your employees, you have to know what they're interested in saying. So think about it as a dinner conversation or cocktail party. Would you ever walk into that room and say, here I am, listen to what I have to say? Or would you first walk into the room, hear what people were talking about, and join that conversation? And that's what this is all about learning first. And then from that foundation, you can do 3 core things. The first one is have a dialogue. You can engage in that conversation. The second thing is you can help your customers, help the people who are in that groundswell, support each other and be part of that entire effort. And the last area is around innovating. So I'm going to give you examples from each of these areas. So let's talk about learning. There are many ways that organizations can learn. You can do market surveys, you can do focus groups, you can go out there and you can follow them around, do ethnographic studies. But also you can use some of these tools and technologies to hear just what they're already doing. So here's an example. Oh, I just realized I had this one too I want to talk about first. It's a little bit, the format's a little bit off, but one of the things that you want to do is think about what those people are actually doing. And so one of the things you can do is actually segment them into different categories. And so at the very bottom are people who are using these technologies, but they're typically looking at them, not actively engaging in it. They're being on the sidelines, watching videos. They're reading blog posts and discussion boards, or they're listening to podcasts. And there are a lot of people doing this. These are global numbers from the Universal McCann study. 59% of people are watching videos. Almost half of people who are online and using the internet every day are reading blogs. And also a good number, about a quarter of them, 23%, are listening to podcasts. But one level higher in terms of engagement are people who are sharing. And people will be sharing information just like, for example, throwing up a photo onto a photo sharing site. They may also be joining social networks where they're sharing information and updating their profiles. I believe that people are engaging in a culture of sharing today, where people are sharing information about themselves, maybe even just putting some information up on Twitter to share information back and forth that way. One level above that are people who are creating content through commenting. So occasional one-off situations, ratings and reviews, they may be commenting on a blog post or adding to a discussion forum. One level above that of engagement is producers, people who are actively creating content on a regular basis, a body of work, for example, a continuous stream of blog posts, or creating an original video. I think you would all agree that there's a distinct difference between a producer and a commenter. And at the very top are people who I believe are a very different group. They're curators. Everything below that group are individual efforts. But when it comes to being a curator, these are the people who organize the content that's out there, all the social content. You need the blessing of your peers. The people who are there, you need to be able to collaborate with them. So anybody can go and edit a wiki. You can go and edit a Wikipedia page. But in order for that change to stick, you have to have demonstrated judgment. People have to agree with that change, and it moves forward. The same thing with the discussion forum. If you are going to moderate, and I know there are a lot of people here who are in that role, then you have to, again, earn that respect of that community in order to have the authority to moderate that forum. Typically, you may be given a title or appointed that responsibility, but you won't be able to keep it without the approval and the agreement of all the people in that community. So the curators form a very different type of role there. So it's important, again, when you're going to start and learn from this audience, to be able to see what they're doing, how they're engaging. And oftentimes, when people are trying to address and look at social technologies, when they think about the audience, they think about the individual uses of these technologies rather than how they want to participate. And you can understand that there's a big mindset and difference between a watcher and somebody who's a producer or curator. So if your audience tends to be very dynamic, very engaged in this place, then your strategy is going to differ very differently if they're up here at the top of the pyramid. But if you have an older demographic that may be more passive, maybe more in the area of being watchers, your strategy, the tools that you create, the action plan that you have is going to be radically different. So let me give you an example now of how one company has done this. Oracle. What they did was they put up this page as a roadblock onto oracle.com for about a week and a half, coming up to their big conference, user conference called Open World at Oracle. And what they did is they said, look, we want to listen, we want to get the feedback. And they did this as a way to drive traffic to their community site called Oracle Mix. Now, they didn't just put an advertisement on the homepage, they took over the entire homepage. And you couldn't opt out of this. They didn't put a frequency cap on it. So if you were going to oracle.com 3 times that day, you saw this page 3 times that day. And they did this commitment not only just on the homepage, they also got 30 of their executives to participate in the discussion forums on the blogs, responding to people's feedback. And this is a great way to not only encourage customers to give them feedback, but also to get the executives into that frame of mind, to get all the community managers and the product managers, the customer service people on board into this idea of transforming the organization to be a much more responsive and listening organization. So I thought this was a radical move on their part. And again, they really, truly engaged people with this particular area. Even when you go now, there's a big section on their homepage that says, Oracle listens, please come and give us our feedback. So that's the idea of listening and learning. Let me talk a little bit about dialogue. Who wants to talk about taxes? We just heard about taxes for the whole past time, but taxes are one of those topics that isn't like entertainment. It's not something people are really passionate about, but people have a lot to say, and they have a lot of questions around it too as well. So H&R Block, preparation company for tax returns, decided they wanted to form community around this. And so one of the things they did was to put together a community site. They had YouTube videos, discussion forums. They even had a Twitter stream so that when anybody was talking about H&R Block, they would respond to them. People could ask questions about it. They had Facebook pages, and they've been doing this for 2 years now during the tax season. What was amazing to me, though, is that after April 15th came along, they kept this going. They said taxes isn't something that just only happens between January and April 15th. It's a conversation and a dialogue and a relationship that we want to have with our customers year-round. Because the actions that you take year-round have tax implications. And so they made the commitment as an organization to do this. Now, this is not exactly your most innovative company. The person who's leading this, Paula Drum, the VP of Digital Marketing, has to do a lot of heavy lifting to convince the executives that this is the right thing to do. They're very terrified of this, they're very nervous about it, but I think, again, they're one of the most innovative companies out there in doing this. And it's H&R Block, not exactly out there in terms of a company known as innovation. And yet, if they can do it, there are so many other companies right behind them who are looking at this and also saying, how do I get to have a dialogue? The hardest thing that she says they had to do was to get people comfortable, get themselves comfortable with having a one-on-one conversation with people in a public space. Because they said, who will have the training? Who will be able to say the right thing? Because when it does come to taxes, you have to be careful to give the right tax advice. So they gave training, they gave guidelines, they take care in terms of the responses they give. And again, they're developing not only just name recognition, it's already very high, but also an experience that when you come to H&R Block, even if you never go to them for tax preparation, you will get good tax advice. So it's very consistent with their brand. I want to go on and talk about how Twitter is being used. Now, how many of you have Comcast? And how many just love Comcast? Never have a problem with it? Okay, right. And do you dread calling up Comcast when you have a problem? Just dread it, right? You're going to be on hold. They're going to drop the calls. So I don't even do that. About a month ago, I had a problem with my Comcast connection. And so what do? I message Frank at Comcast Cares, and I said my connection's down. Can you help me out here? He connected me, ran a couple pings on his end, and then he connected me over to somebody in Central, and they had a person at my house in 24 hours. It gave me the lowdown that, they were doing some additions to the head end, so we got to figure it out. Now, what happens here is that he's making a one-person effort to show that Comcast is trying to make a difference. From one person's efforts on Twitter, he goes and finds people who are complaining about their Comcast accounts and sends them messages. So he does a Twitter search, says who is actually writing about Comcast. If they're happy, he goes, great, so glad you're happy. If they're not happy, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? And he's initiating those dialogues. Other people are initiating it with him. He has a full blessing of Comcast. Again, he just sort of said, hey, can I do it? Asked his manager. Manager said, okay, great. And it's really taken off. Well, what has this done for Comcast? Have any of you seen that video on YouTube where the Comcast technician is falling asleep on somebody's couch? That's what this is starting to counter. The fact that you can go out there and instead of seeing an impersonal face of a company, you see a personal face, and you can talk to somebody who understands where you live in the Twitter space, where you feel comfortable. So that's a different type of dialogue, a real dialogue that's happening between a company and the customers. Here's an example of a conversation that Skittles has. They have a place on Facebook, and they have a little area called Mix the Rainbow where you can mix a beat together. And some of the conversations happen here. Derek says, is it just me, or does there seem to be too many orange ones in the bags now? And somebody from Skittles, called Skittles, wrote back, Derek, despite what you or the internet may think, we can assure you there is no orange Skittles comparison. Red, on the other hand, a little bit of humor there. And then Ryan comes back and he says, hey, look at these beats. Once you mix a beat, you can actually publish it. You can share it with your friends. He posted it on the wall there. And Skittles writes back, that mix is hot, Ryan. Keep them coming, everyone. And so they're encouraging people to do this. And why? What happens when Ryan puts up that beat? Who sees it? All of his friends. What happens when Derek puts up that little Twitter, feed up there, shows up on his news feed for all of his friends to see? This dialogue isn't just happening between one person. It's happening in public. Other people see it. And people can see and experience Skittles beyond just what's happening on the Skittles page. Again, this is dialogue that's being amplified. And we think of it as becoming not so much viral as being pushed along the way. that you can really spread that conversation much further than you ever could before because of these social technologies again. I want to go on and talk about how you can help your users. This is a wiki page from Wet Paint that Discovery Channel put up for one of their hit shows, Deadliest Catch. And if you're just catching up to the show, you may be like, what's going on here? Instead of having to go back and and watch all the episodes, you can go here and see information about it. They have contests. Now, Discovery Channel set up the wiki originally, but they don't maintain it. The biggest fans maintain it. Think about customer service, how that could change. Instead of you providing the answers, your fans and your customers will provide the answers for you. And what if the information here, how much control do you have to give up? Well, quite a bit. But there are moderators who make sure it's happening, but more importantly, the community moderates itself so that the fans, the customers, the audience is actually doing that support work. And what does that leave the Discovery team to go do? They're free now to go and do all these other value-added areas that only the Discovery people can do. And in fact, you could actually argue that the fans have more time, have more inclination, the passion to go out there and find all this information, put it up there, organize it, manage it. The last area of innovation is innovation. How many of you go to Starbucks? Would admit going to Starbucks? Okay, I love going to Starbucks. You probably have an idea of how Starbucks could be improved. My big beef is I always get drip coffee there. And yet I have to stand behind all these people ordering the double latte cappuccinos with hazelnut syrup. And so what I would love is this idea. Be able to go in there, swipe my loyalty card, keep walking into the counter, and pick up my drink. Because I just order the same darn thing every single time. And so they have this under review, they say. And you can go and follow a link to a blog post that they have from the CIO who was saying, we are looking at this, and here are the technical challenges. We expect to have parts of this in place by middle of next year, probably the early part of the summer. That's real feedback. And this whole process, again, you could probably go and suggest things onto most companies about what you could do, but it goes up publicly. You can vote for it. There are 354 comments about what this idea looks like, how it can be improved. People are writing back from Starbucks into that question, one question here, and there are thousands of questions and ideas that Starbucks is getting. Now, Starbucks doesn't just put up this technology. They have 50 people within the organization in different areas, everyone from furniture and store design to menu selection to promotions and marketing, checking each of these categories. Those people then go back to Starbucks, to their teams, and surface the ideas that are valid, surface the concerns that people have around each of these areas. Again, that's a way that organizations are not just using the technology, but transforming themselves and also changing the type of relationships they have with their customers. So that's a quick overview of the book. One of the key things that we talk about, though, is that these ideas are just beginning to happen. And we're seeing more and more companies really starting to embrace them and really try a lot of these experiments. But the time has come where the experiments are moving into wholesale implementations. They're no longer things that are just hiding in a corner, taking a small piece of budget. People are really deciding now to invest heavily in these areas and to make them much more focused and a core part of the strategy and the plan of an organization. So what I'm going to do is talk about some of the best practices of how to encourage that inside Google with your partners and also with your customers and fellow employees. So how to get started, a couple things. Again, you have to listen first to those organs, to what the audience is trying to say. You want to set the goal very clearly in terms of what you're trying to do. Is it to learn, to help them, to innovate, to have a dialogue with them? Because the worst thing you can say is, well, I think we should have a blog. And then you ask them, well, why do you want to have a blog? And they go, well, everyone else has one. Or a CEO recently said to me, I need to have a blog because my competitor has one. Just get me one of those. Get me one of those. Social network, community discussion board, YouTube videos, whatever it is, that's probably the worst thing that you could do, just to say, I want the technology. If you have a goal very clearly, then you know what to do with it. And the other thing, again, is to start small, again, because this is very hard. So just want to, and the last thing is, I put up a cover, partly because of the sports analogy, but also because this is really hard to do. And inevitably, you're going to be making mistakes. And I know at Google, there's a very strong culture of experimenting, innovating, trying things, and then learning from those mistakes and moving forward. The iteration process has to be very, very quick. It becomes harder when you're talking about an outside community. It feels a lot more risky. And I can guarantee you, I have lots and lots of scars. I have lots of mistakes that I've made along the way and continue to make them. And then the question becomes not so much if you're going to make a mistake, but how big is that mistake going to be? And more importantly, how are you going to recover from that so that you can move forward? So let me give you a couple of examples also around a key question I get all the time, which is how do you measure the success of social media? And especially if, again, you're trying to hit that goal, how do you actually do it? So first of all, you have to determine your goals, first of all. If you don't have that target, you can't define what those goals are. And the second thing is you want to use the same metrics as you typically do for a lot of your strategic or your marketing goals. So use the existing metrics that you have. There's one small problem with this. When I talk to many companies, they kind of go, what metrics were those that you use to measure marketing today? Because a lot of times marketing is about brand. What about public relations? Well, it's about mentions, but what do you get for public relations? What are you truly getting for marketing? If you don't know what those metrics are, it's awfully hard to even understand how social media is going to be working. So I do believe that there are some micro metrics. I mean, again, this medium is so measurable. So let's talk about learning. For example, what kind of number of customer feedbacks are you getting? Are the number increasing? Is the quality of that increasing because of the use of these technologies? And the value of that is, can you get faster and fresher customer insights than you can through traditional means? Now, that value is fairly judgmental. It's not something that's directly related to sales or to a transaction. And yet about 80% of any organization's spending is not directly related to a transaction or sale. So think about those existing metrics that you have, all the things that you do to support some of these other areas and really drive value and derive the value metrics that you need. For Dialog, for example, is it the number of referrals that you get, the number of comments that you get? Again, are you getting better brand loyalty? Are people understanding and experiencing the attributes of your brand and understanding that in a better way than they did before? Help in supporting them. The number of issues you're addressing. Is it actually customer satisfaction going up? Are your support costs going down? And then finally, in terms of innovation, is your development process faster as a result? But I think a better way to think about metrics, instead of those micro metrics, are the higher order metrics. And there are two of them that are in common use today. First of all is the Net Promoter Score. How often do people recommend you? And this is so relevant to social technologies because if you're engaging with people in social technologies, you can directly see the impact in that people will recommend it. They will talk about it. They will share it as part of that pyramid of engagement that they have. So this is a very key goal, and you can actually measure this. In addition to, do they say it, do they actually act on it? So I've seen some companies where Net Promoter Scores are very high, but they don't have any way for those people to actuate on those desires to share it with their friends, in which case a social technology strategy becomes very, very relevant for them. The second one is lifetime value. Many companies understand this concept, very few actually measure it. And lifetime value, the classical definition of this, there are four components. First of all, what's the cost of acquisition? What's the cost of retention? How much revenue do they generate? And the most importantly thing, what's the referral value? And again, that referral value, again, relates to social technologies in terms of being able to refer things, but also all of these other areas can be increased or reduced. The cost of acquisition retention can be reduced through the use of social technologies, and actually you can increase the benefit, the revenue associated with that account, with that customer, through, again, social technologies. So if you go back to these core areas that you're trying to push forward as an organization, you can think and say, how can social technologies impact our overall core strategy? The best strategy plans I've seen in the social media and technology spaces are actually very aligned to a corporate strategy. The 5 corporate strategies and missions, initiatives of a company, and then going across right next to them how social technologies can help that organization reach those goals. That's true alignment. So there's another area, which is, again, there are a lot of people out there. There's a whole ecosystem of people who are out there to help now. Interactive agencies, PR agencies, there are a lot of new startups, social media boutiques, and individual consultants. It's a mishmash of people out there. You're going to be talking to a lot of those people over the next day or so. I'm also starting a list at wiki.altimetergroup.com if you want to take a look at it. I also have some questions that can help identify this. And I would apply this to not only the people outside, but also internally. So are these experts focused on relationships and not the campaigns? All too often, the agencies that I talk to are socializing existing campaigns rather than truly thinking about how to develop a relationship. The second thing is, do they actually use social media themselves very successfully? And there's nothing worse than somebody who can talk the game but can't walk it. And then you need people who are committed to resources, to learning. Are they going to conferences? Are they on top of the latest things? What are the places they go to for help? Have they learned from their mistakes? Will they actually talk about the mistakes they made? And then finally, I think this is the most important thing. Do they respect and are they humbled by this space, by these technologies? All too often, I see people coming in and it's like, I know everything about the space. I can be the expert and guide you through this. And I can guarantee you they're going to get knocked onto their seat because you never know what's going to happen. You're completely out of control in this space. So I want to talk a little bit about the future, and then we can take some questions. My key thing about the future, and some of you may have heard me talk about this, is I believe that social networks will be like air. And the idea here is not that Facebook or MySpace, LinkedIn, those sites would be ubiquitous, but the idea that your social graph, your network of people, wherever you need them and want them, will be at your fingertips so that you can access them, the wisdom that they have, the advice that they can give, the support that you need, through any kind of medium that you need and want. You won't be beholden to any particular space. I also believe that 5 years from now, we're going to look back into this time and think, wasn't it kind of quaint and antiquated that we had to go someplace to be social? That we had to go to Facebook and be explicit about our relationships. So a couple things about how that's going to happen. I'll give you an example. Here's a book. If you go and buy a book today, where do you go to buy a book? You go to Amazon, right? And when I go to Amazon, I see review from somebody. In this case, Jana. She's a top 200 reviewer. She probably a lot of trust in her. She writes a very good review. Okay, that's helpful. That's extremely helpful with that community. But what if I could see the review of a friend? So here's my friend Renee. And he actually wrote a review of this. I had to go digging for this on Facebook. It's buried on his profile someplace. But it's a really interesting story. And I know Renee. I can send him a quick note on Facebook and say, hey, what did you like about the book? But more importantly, I know Renee. I know his taste in books. And whether I agree with his taste or not, we've talked about books in the past. So that provides me so much more context than an anonymous, well, not anonymous, but a general review that I don't know anything about Jana. So what I think would happen in the future is that there'll be a friends review button here, where there'll be aggregated all of my friends. Amazon will know who my social network is and who in that social network has written a review and has given Amazon permission for me to see that review too. That's truly a social network that's exploded beyond the confines of those walled gardens. So what does a social network like AIR look like in the future? A couple things. First of all, there has to be universal identity. And OpenID is out there as a standard. There were other things like OAuth that allow people to understand who's creating what. But I believe that there are two things that will truly identify you: your email address and your mobile phone number. Because everyone knows what the email address is. How many of you know what your OpenID is? Because you all have one. But no one really knows how to use it or do it. But you all know what email address is, and how do you sign into social networking sites today? With your email address. And how do I use Twitter? I use my email address to sign in, and I use my mobile phone number to also post into that. The two of them I can link. And I have total control over those things because they are in my control, and I own them, so to speak. The second thing is an open social graph. And Google has done a lot with this, with open social. But it's more than just a social graph that lives inside your friend's network. If I have a mobile phone, the people I call on that phone, the people I text on that phone are truly my social graph. The people who I email all the time and message and dialogue with on IM, that's my social graph. It's a living, breathing social graph of who I am connected to, how often I am connected to them. And so I believe that the communications owners, people like Google, Yahoo, Microsoft, AOL, the people who actually own a lot of that information and background would be the providers of that social graph, not just the explicit relationships that you have on the social networks. The third thing, portable applications. Not just social applications, but applications that, again, tap into these social aspects, and then you can take them anywhere you want. Now, I had an iPhone, and then one of the things that you could do on there is, again, you can write tons of applications to that, but very few of them really, truly tap into my social graph, in particular, the people who I call. Now, a lot of the things and applications on there are basically glorified web widgets, or they may tap into existing social networks. But what if these applications could go anywhere with you, are cognizant of your location, the context of where you are, what you're doing, the people you're connected to in that particular situation? Becomes a totally different type of application that you can create because of that. And then finally, there's one other concept I want to put up there. It's a business model, which is the idea around a personal CPM. So what if you have all this information out there, what a person is interested in, what they're doing, instead of having a CPM set based on their demographics, could you have that person actually have a CPM based on not only what they're doing, but how referral-oriented are they? So if I'm a highly social person and I'm constantly giving reviews, I'm constantly sharing, my CPM to reach me is actually going to be much higher than somebody who's not engaged in all of these social activities. So just to close up, a couple key concepts. I believe that everyone is going to be a marketer. You look at companies like Microsoft, IBM, Intel, Sun Microsystems, and anybody can be a blogger there. Anybody. And typically they have social media policies that are very clear about what they can and can't do. But it boils down to this: be smart. I trust you because I've employed you. You've gone through the gauntlet of getting hired. You know what you can and can't do. So just abide by that. And here's an example from a mainline company, not a technology company that does this. Now, they only have a certain number of people who go and do this, but Southwest Airlines has a wonderful site called Nuts About Southwest. And here's a blogger by the name of Gordon. Gordon is a mechanical engineer. He's in charge of maintaining airplanes. How many customers a year do you think he sees? None. And yet he's charged with talking about what he does at Southwest, why he's interested. He actually wrote a poster, a fascinating one, about Charles E. Taylor, the mechanic for the Wright brothers. You're like, hey, mechanics are really important to air travel. And so he's actually given this perspective of why he loves working for Southwest, what he does. And how important this is. Well, if you travel on Southwest, you probably have heard some of the difficulties they had around maintenance. So it becomes actually very important that you hear from the people who maintain the planes that you fly on. So that's an example of how everyone becomes a marketer. A marketer not so much in terms of creating a message to go out there, but a marketer who develops a relationship with customers in all the unique ways that each employee can. Another concept is that org charts are becoming less relevant. So most organization charts look like this. They have some sort of structure going on. Every company has departments and silos and verticals where it's very difficult for people to connect with each other. I believe that work actually looks much more like this, right? It's a flow chart. Work actually has to go around in many different areas. If you think about where the org chart came from, it came back from over 100 years ago from the railroad industry. That's where American and traditional and modern business management has come from. And yet, that was an actual model that was very efficient because information was scarce and information sharing was expensive. But today, with social technologies, information sourcing and sharing becomes very inexpensive. And if you can remove a lot of that friction from information sharing and allow people within organizations to get to that information back and forth, magical things happen. So here's an example from Best Buy. They have an internal social network called BlueShirtNation.com. And they call it that because if you ever go into a Best Buy store, what do people wear? Blue shirts. And so they have a site there, and this person wrote back, who the heck designed the new digital SLR display cases? And he posted up a picture. You can see that the display case is a little bit too high, too right. It just doesn't fit. And he goes, does anyone know what the heck is going on with this? An hour and a half later, this person, somebody else signed on. And it was a person who actually had designed these display cases. And she wrote back and like, hey, I designed these things, and you got sent the wrong one. I'm going to go back into the office tomorrow morning and make sure the right cases got to the right stores. Now, they broke through those organizational walls. This poor person who was managing that display floor probably would have to go to the department manager inside that store would then track down the store manager, would go to the district manager, all the way up the silo and chain. They would find the right person, figure out that the wrong cases got rented in the stores, and come back down the chain again. And that case probably would have taken weeks, if not months, to have gotten to the right place. It took them a week and a half to get the right case delivered to them and actually identified the problem and solved it within just a day or two. So what happens when you give people that information, that ability to connect with each other, and to be able to make these connections that blow up, in many ways, challenge that traditional organization chart? The employees love this. The people who have the biggest problem with this, they're managers, because their power and their authority is changing. And a lot of the research that I'm doing right now is around how organization management and leadership needs to change as a result of all these social technologies that are in place. Because when you do break down these walls, these silos, how you define management, how you define leadership fundamentally changes. So here's an example from Meetup. Some of you may have known about meetup.org. They're a small for-profit company in New York, and they actually blew up their entire org chart. They got everyone in a room together because there were about 60 people at that point. They were like, organizing and running you guys is too much work. We're going to blow it all up. Do what you think is the most important thing. And in many ways, I think it resembles some of the activity here at Google, in that if you had an idea for developing and changing it, you had to convince people to work on that project with you. And if you can't convince other people to work on it with you, then probably wasn't a good idea. So a lot of the product managers did not feel comfortable with this and they left. The people who love this, the developers of the site, because their ideas of what would work, what wouldn't work, actually counted. Because you had to convince them to come onto that team. They weren't assigned to teams anymore. They had to convince them as a scarce resource of how they would actually allocate their time. So it's an interesting thing. This is very difficult to do in terms of blowing up organization structures. And you have to be a small, close-knit team where communication of what the strategy, the mission, and the direction of where the company needs to be headed is very clear. But it's an interesting thing to see an experiment. I'm seeing a lot of organizations now doing this at the work team level, at the small team level, where they are completely self-directed in terms of what they want to focus on. And at the very top level, they have some very specific goals and things that they have to attribute to, and they have to go and fulfill. The last point I want to make before summarizing is that firewalls are starting to disappear. As you saw from the Starbucks example, the firewall of us versus them is actually becoming we. That mentality of where innovation comes from, who actually provides customer support, who actually does the work in creating that dialogue and sustaining it is becoming not only just much more permeable, but also from a technology point of view, but also from a mindset point of view. And I think, again, when mindset actually changes, you see, because of these social technologies, the organization changes too as well. And so here's an example again from Dell, using the same technology as in Starbucks. What they started doing is creating a Linux-based PC that was completely generated by customers out there. And they created the product, picked the operating system, figured out the support levels. Basically, there was no support because these are Linux users, and launched it in 60 days. And typically, Dell takes between 9 to 18 months to launch a new product. So faster development, very much done in public with the cooperation of their customers. So just to summarize, I think this is the hardest thing, to let go of control. Because when it comes to actually forming communities and deep relationships, think about the relationships you have today. They're much more meaningful because you are not in control. You don't know where they're going to be going. And so oftentimes when you think about control and letting it go, it's really difficult to do. And one of the things I believe that an essential tool to have is a little bit humorous, but you will always need intestinal fortitude to make this happen. And so what I encourage people to do is to have a big bottle of Rolaids on their desk. Because you will always feel a little bit queasy if you're doing this right. A little bit sick to your stomach. They're like, oh my goodness, what are we really truly doing here? Because if you truly let go of control, really engaging with people, where you don't know what's going to happen, that's when the magic actually happens. So, just to summarize, think about the kind of relationship you want with your audience. Start small. Start with a simple goal of what you want to accomplish with that community. And then finally, plan for the transformation of your organization, of your team, of that relationship that you will form. All right. I think that's it. Thank you very much.